My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. So today's Gospel comes from the book of Luke, chapter 16. And here we read the famous parable of our Lord about the rich man and Lazarus, also known as the parable of Dives and Lazarus. Dives is Latin for a rich man. And as often happens, Jesus uses richly textured imagery with people, places, and events that his listeners can easily relate to. Occasionally, he will exaggerate something to make a point, what we call a hyperbole. Jesus, how easy you make it for your listeners to understand you, and by extension, how easy you make it for me to understand you in the silence of my heart as I have this conversation with you. And here you speak to the Pharisees and tell them the story of Dives, who was that rich man who used to dress in fine linen and feast magnificently every single day. And you contrast this with Lazarus, who was this poor man who lay at the gate of Dives. And Lazarus is not only poor, but is also sick and hungry. How do we know that? Well, we read how he was covered with sores and how he longed to fill himself with the scraps that fell from the rich man's table. It even gets more graphic because you're told that dogs even came and licked his sores. Eventually, both of them die, starting with the poor man, who we are told was carried away by angels to the bosom of Abraham. And then the rich man followed. But here, something strange happens. We are not told that he was carried away by angels to the bosom of Abraham. We are simply told that he died and was buried. Pause for a moment and recall this fact that one day we shall all die. And Holy Mother Church does speak to us about what it calls the novissimi, the last things: death, judgment, heaven and hell. Now, we are wired for heaven, and in the famous words of St. Augustine, Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. But let's not also forget this other reality, that is hell, for indeed hell is real. And so going back to the Gospels, we read about Hades, this place of torment. And here we see the rich man in torment, in pain, in suffering, crying out to Abraham, begging for some sort of relief from that pain, from those flames of torment. Jesus, I know you tell me about hell, not to scare me out of my wits, in order for me to live in that servile fear, but rather to be aware of this reality and to live instead with that filial fear of not wishing in any way to disappoint you because you love me so much. And so Holy Mother Church goes on to remind us in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that to die in mortal sin without repenting and accepting God's merciful love means remaining separated from Him forever by our own free choice. This state of definitive self-exclusion from communion with God and the Blessed is called hell. That is exactly what hell is, a self-exclusion. And so if I fail to love God, if I fail to love my neighbor, then I exclude myself from heaven, from the beatific vision, from union with Christ, from communion with the saints. And so let us resolve to wage a war against sin, especially mortal sin and deliberate venial sin. Lord, may I hate sin, and may I hate it passionately, because it is the one thing that can keep me away from you. And as we learn from the Gospel, when the rich man is begging for some relief, Abraham then reminds him that there is a great chasm, a great gulf between him and the rich man that cannot be crossed. In other words, we have no way of repenting after we have died. We have no way of crossing from one place to the other, from heaven to hell, or from hell to heaven, because of that great chasm. And so, what is the solution, we might ask? And the solution is simple. It is in that four-letter word, love. Love for God and love for neighbor. You may remember the two tablets of the law, and how the fathers of the church will speak about how Christ summarized the 10 commandments into those two tablets. The first 3 commandments made up the first tablet, that is, that love for God, and the next 7 made up the second tablet, that is, love for neighbor. In the case of the parable, what stands out is that lack of that love for neighbor. Here we see how Dives, the rich man, did not love his neighbor, Lazarus, the poor man who lay at his gate. Is there Lazarus in my life? I just need to open my eyes and maybe Lazarus is right next to me. Could be my brother, could be my sister, could be my mom, could be my dad, could be a relative, could be a friend who is in need. Recently, a friend of mine told me a story of something that he learned on his wedding day. There was this man who used to work in a bus company, and he used to be a conductor on a bus. At the time, he used to have a driver and the conductor whose duty was to collect the fare, the bus fare. And one day when they were traveling from one village to another village, they saw this woman who was walking along the road. And one thing that struck this conductor is that she was heavily pregnant. And so he asked the bus driver to stop. And he got off the bus and went to this woman and asked her where she was going. And she said she was going to hospital to deliver a baby. And he asked her where the hospital was, and she told him where the hospital was. And he realized that she might not make it. And so she asked the other passengers to alight, and he got for them another bus. Then, taking this woman on board, they took a detour and took her to hospital, where she delivered safely. The conductor turned out to be a great uncle to my friend, and the woman that he helped turned out to be the grandmother of the wife of my friend. In other words, the baby she delivered was my friend's mother-in-law. Think about that. If this man hadn't taken that extraordinary measure, and perhaps he met some resistance, this man might not have met his future wife, his bride. And so let us never forget to open our eyes and to see those in need, those who need us, and that we respond with that love. And so let us love our way to heaven by first and foremost loving God, and then loving neighbor for the sake of God, by loving those who stand in need. And that way, through God's mercy, hell shall not be a place for us, but rather heaven. And there is no one better to turn to for help in our effort to get to heaven than Mary, our mother. She is, after all, the Queen of Heaven. She is also the refuge of sinners and the help of Christians. Let us therefore go to her intercession and ask her to help us love her Son above all things, and to help us love our neighbor just like she loved her neighbors and just like she loves us. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations which you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into practice. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.